Hello. And it came to pass that the skies darkened, the trees bent in the wind, the heavens opened, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. So much for the summer. Typically, though, we'll all be looking to next year and hoping things will be better, but at this time of year, we should also take a look behind us, keeping alive some of our happiest memories. For example, I can remember the day I first met my wife, Ephesia. That's maybe not the best example, but as a matter of fact, I'd been officiating at a Christmas wedding in Falkirk. It was a mixed marriage. She came from Edinburgh and he came from Glasgow. Anyway, during the reception, I met Ephesia just outside the ladies' toilets. She was going in just as I was coming out. And suddenly, she held a small bunch of mistletoe over my head and kissed me. Of course, I kissed her back. I certainly wasn't going to kiss her face. And it was at New Year one year when I was returning home by train that a fight broke out in my compartment. 3 young men quarrelled over a game of poker, and suddenly one of them began driving his knee again and again into the groin of an innocent passenger. I had to intervene. After all, it was my groin. But I took the opportunity of explaining how a deck of cards can offer us a great deal of spiritual insight. For example, when I see the ace, 2 and 3, I think of young Jason McClumpher. He was caught moonlighting and drawing his dole at the same time. He was called before 3 DHSS inspectors who asked him his name. "Joseph," he replied cheekily. "And what's your wife's name?" they asked. "Mary," he replied. "Where do you live?" they asked him. "Nazareth," he said. "Well, Joseph," they said, "just you go home to Nazareth and tell Mary that the 3 wise men have stopped your Baru money." The 4 reminds me of the number of people in the congregation at last week's evening service. The 5 and 6, the 56 pence we took in the collection. When I see the 7, 8, and 9, I remember that was the number of the hotel bedroom where I spent my honeymoon. It was absolute bliss, even though Ephesia had to stay at home with a headache. 10 makes me think of the choir. 10 wise virgins. I've never believed in foolish virgins. That always seemed to be a contradiction in terms. And the Jack, of course, old Jack Bampot, organist and choir master, whose renderings at the organ get more and more like Name That Tune. The Queen is, of course, my good lady Ephesia, who's been on a diet for 6 weeks and all she's lost is her temper. Finally, there is the King, which I see as my father, who taught me the real meaning of truth. My father worked in the mill at Lunkerty, and we lived in a little cottage which had an outside toilet about 100 yards away, standing at the edge of the river. One day our toilet was found upside down in the water. My father called me to him. "Agnes," he said. He was short-sighted and stubborn, my father. "Agnes," he said, "I'm going to ask you a question, but before I do, I want you to remember the story of George Washington, who cut down his father's favourite cherry tree and who, when asked, declared, 'I cannot tell a lie, father. It was I who cut down the cherry tree,' and his father rewarded him." "Now," said my father, "what can you tell me about the toilet?" I cannot tell a lie, I cried. I pushed the toilet into the river. Well, he nearly murdered me. I've never had such a thrashing in my life. I cried out in despair, but Father, I said, you told me that George Washington said I cut down the cherry tree and his father rewarded him. I know, said my father, but George Washington's father was not sitting in the cherry tree.